I'm Jason Little, and this is 10 Minutes Off the Top of My Head. We're continuing the series, A Great Blessing is Coming. And we are going to talk about science today. And I want to read you a Bible verse, the book of 1 Timothy chapter number 6 and verse number 20. The Bible says, O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. Now, if you're a Bible student, you will automatically call me out and you will say, now that word science there is actually the word gnosis in the Greek. And gnosis means knowledge, and that's the only time that we find in the New Testament that the word science is used. That the word gnosis is translated as science. Okay, fine. You're absolutely correct. I agree with you. So what? If you look up in the dictionary, the word science also means knowledge. And we know that science is knowledge. That's what they tell us. But what is science? Well, I think that we can look and see that science is wrong. Oftentimes, science is completely wrong. They backtrack on what they say. They come up with new ideas and new theories, and then they disprove those. Then they debunk them. Then they go back to them. It's a bunch of nonsense. We have come into a time in the world where science has become a religion and science has become a god. And it's been defined as scientism by many different people, and it has happened many different times throughout the ages. As a matter of fact, many years ago, I used to use that term scientism when debating people about evolution. And even back in the 20s and even before then, in the early 1900s, this phrase was already in use. Scientism. And we look at, and I want to turn you on to another video. It's a long video. It's about an hour and a half long. It's by a channel called Celebrate Truth. I'm going to put the link in the description because I want you to watch this video. It's very well done, and it really explains the whole position of scientism. But I also want to read you something from a book that was published in 1865 by a man who went by the pseudonym Parallax. His real name is Samuel Rowbotham. And he says this: speculative men, by force of genius, may invent systems that will perhaps be greatly admired for a time. These, however, are phantoms, which the force of truth will sooner or later dispel. And while we are pleased with the deceit, true philosophy, with all the arts and improvements that depend upon it, suffers. Interesting. 1865. Now, Samuel Rowbotham was an Englishman, and he wrote this in his book called Zetetic Astronomy. And it is a very interesting quote. Here's another interesting quote. And tell me what you think this sounds like. The real state of things escapes our observation, or if it presents itself to us, we are apt either to reject it or reject it wholly as fiction, or by new efforts of a vain ingenuity to interweave it with our own conceits and labor to make it tally with our favorite schemes. Very interesting quote. I believe Mr. Parallax, Mr. Rowbotham, is explaining there the whole concept of cognitive dissonance. So science, what is the draw for people to constantly cite science? As I pointed out in the previous videos, there is a they out there, and they use science. And I explained to you that the Illuminati is not a noun, it is an adjective to describe people who are illuminated. And science, what are the roots of science? Where did science begin? Well, many people believe that science began as what we now call alchemy. And what is alchemy? Well, alchemy, everybody knows, is turning lead into gold. Isn't that what alchemy was? Not even close. Alchemy is the science of spiritualism. Alchemy was a spiritual endeavor that was carried out by men of science. And what was the lead and what is the gold? Well, this, excuse me, this is a very long and involved study. So I'm not going to get into alchemy a great deal, but I am going to get into it a little bit. Alchemy is a process by which the lead, the brute man, goes from being lead, which is a base, worthless metal to some extent. It's not valuable monetarily speaking, to gold, which is the most valuable of metals. Now, I know you'll say platinum, but whatever. Just for the sake of the discussion here, looking at what the alchemists looked at. So you want to go from lead to gold. What is the process to do that? They weren't necessarily concerned with actually turning lead into gold. That was never the purpose of alchemy. The purpose of alchemy was turning a brute man into a spiritual being. Really, it was finding the God within. And so when we look at alchemy as the process unfolds, it was very scientific. Alchemy is the pre-chemistry, if you will. And without chemistry, you don't really have any other science. You can't really have physics. You can't have biology. You can't have astronomy. You can't have anything without chemistry. And so even geology, you need chemistry. And so it is the basis for our modern science, alchemy, believe it or not. And I wholeheartedly believe this. You may not, you may disagree with me, and I invite you to comment respectfully, please. Respectfully in the comment section. Feel free to comment and tell me why you disagree with alchemy being the basis of science. Now, alchemy was a spiritual endeavor. It was not a physically scientific endeavor, but there was physical science involved in it. And they made very great discoveries through the practice of alchemy. But you can't really understand alchemy without understanding first the mystery schools. And I mentioned this before, mystery schools. And I think that it's important to understand what the mystery schools have in common so that we can understand what it means to be illuminated. And so I know we're talking about science, but we're going to talk about spirituality. What do the mystery schools believe? What is the foundational principle of mystery schools? Well, it is this, and I believe I've explained this in another video, but it bears repeating because through repetition we learn things, right? So check this out. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. We know that. And we read through the book of Genesis and we get to day 6 and God creates man and he creates him out of the dust of the earth and he breathes into his nostrils the breath of life and man became a living soul, the Bible says. Now God put him in the garden and he said, tend the garden and you can eat of any tree in the fruit, any fruit of the trees in the garden except for the tree that's in the midst of the garden, which is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat of that. Now, this is where the mystery schools all agree with all of that stuff. But here's where they depart. They say that God was trying to keep knowledge from mankind. Now, understand that this tree is not the tree of knowledge. It's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so Adam and Eve were innocent. They could not, by decision, sin other than eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so if they had eaten that fruit, they would have sinned. Along comes the serpent, who is Satan. And he convinces Eve, or Lucifer. Let's call him Lucifer, because that's what the mystery schools call him, Lucifer. So Lucifer convinces Eve to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And his explanation to her was, look, God doesn't want you to be like him. If you eat this fruit, you'll be like God, knowing good from evil. You'll have knowledge. And so Lucifer convinces her to eat the fruit. She eats it. She convinces Adam to eat the fruit. God is very angry. And so it is Lucifer who now takes control of mankind and begins to show them many things. God expels them from the garden. He pronounces a curse on them. And Lucifer gives them clothes, teaches them how to make clothes from animal skins. And he gives them their first set of clothing from animal skins. Now, this is where the Bible and the mystery schools depart, and they never join again. So we see that the mystery schools believe, and this is foundational to the mystery schools, this is foundational to being illuminated, that it is Lucifer who has guided and loved and cared for mankind, not Jehovah. Jehovah is actually an evil being who wants the destruction of mankind and will destroy mankind eventually, and Lucifer is trying to save mankind. Lucifer wants to give knowledge to mankind, and so Lucifer taught men how to deal with, taught men metallurgy, He taught men how to make fire. He taught men how to build the wheel and all these other things that came in, including alchemy. Now, we're going to get into alchemy a little bit more in the next video. That's 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop here, but that's a good introduction to science. So God bless you. See you on the next video.